Hello! Today I wanted to show you guys some of the media that I use when I work in my Strata journals. So this is one of the journals I made as a sample for the class. And it's got some darker pages in here that I painted. And I did have some questions on what media to use on the dark pages that will show up. So I've got some of my supplies here that I use. My favorite is Posca Pens. These are acrylic markers. They have acrylic paint in them, but they act like markers. So, and they come in different sizes. I use this one to do the giant X's. It's just one coat. It covers really well. And then I like to use these Derwent drawing pencils. I picked some colors that go with the journal. It's kind of a blue and green journal with a little bit of orange. So they've got Solway blue and wheat. I've got smoke blue. And so I use this smoke blue to do, to do an X on top of the Posca pen once it was dry. And then the Posca pens come in different sizes. So I've used this one in ivory that's got a smaller tip to do these tiny ivory dots. And then I've got this medium nib, and I use that to do some circles on here. And so all of the Posca pens are acrylic paint. They're very opaque and they show up really well on dark colors. So here are a few of the ones I've used in this journal. And then besides using any colored pencils, but I particularly like the Derwent drawing pencils. They're really creamy and smooth and very opaque. And there are also some other paint pens you can buy. I do have some cheaper ones. They take a lot of shaking. They separate. They take a lot of shaking. But they are in some different colors than are available in Posca pens, so those are an option too. This is just a set from Amazon paint marker pen with an extra fine point. These are not the best quality, but if you can get them to work and you spend a lot of time shaking them up, they can be very opaque on this paper too. Let's see. Here's another dark page. It started out this dark blue, and then I just created the grid lines with this extra wide Posca pen, and then filled it in with some of the other pens, and then gradually got down to much thinner. This is a really small nib for these fine blue lines, and just kept working that way. And I kept the background color in, but it's not the dominant color now because I've layered so much pattern over it. Let's see. Here's two pages that are very dark, and I just did very simple patterns on these using 3 colors of Posca pen in the same thickness. And so that's something you can do with a dark background. This is pretty dark too, and I just layered a couple Posca pens over in lighter colors. And then this one's a really dark one, and I've covered most of this background up just by simple patterning. And this one I used more than Posca pens. So this, and this are Posca pens, but then I've also used these. These are Kwik Stix solid tempera paint. They're for children, but they're actually really great to use. It goes on creamy and smooth, and it dries in a couple of minutes to solid paint that is water soluble. And so you can layer on top of it. And then I also love using these Stabilo woodies, all 3, what are they called? 3-in-1 pencils. These are made for children, but they give you light fast ratings on them, and they're just so much fun to use. So I love using these. I think this was the one I used lightly over the background, and because the paper is a textured watercolor paper, it kind of gave this pebbly pattern, and so you can see the background peeping through. These are fun to use too, especially the lighter colors will show up over the darker. So that's this one. Another thing I can use, and I think that's what I used in the middle, are these chalk markers. They are similar to paint markers, but the chalk will, you have to be careful. It may smear back off, and if you put wet media over it, it will come back up. But these are also great to use too. Another thing I like to use are water-soluble crayons. You can do, my favorites are the Caran Neo Pastels, but I've also got a set of these Lyra Aquacolor aquarels, and they're just like wax crayons, but once you get them wet, then they turn into like watercolor. So I usually use them dry mostly, but for some, I don't know if I have any in here. Sometimes I get them wet for a different effect, but these will show up really well on dark paper too. So I thought we'd just I'll show you one of these pages here and use some of this media on it. So I will start, my favorite thing is just stitching. And these are both in a light gray color. That's those. This is the Stabilo Woody. You can see how well this shows up just on the dark paper. Here are the Derwent drawing pencils. Let me do some stitching up here. Because this is textured watercolor paper, I'm going back and forth a couple times to get it down into the textured dimples. Here is Smoke Blue. And Wheat. Now let's see. We've got the Kwik Stix. Now the only problem with these is you're not getting detailed line work with these because it is just like a giant glue stick shape chunk. So you can kind of use an edge to make smaller lines, but it's a little difficult to tell where your marks will be. This is so smooth and creamy, and it will dry in just a few minutes. Now it will dry a little bit lighter, and we'll see that as we go. But these are really fun to use and handy, and it's basically paint that you can take with you and not make a mess if you're out on the go. Here's another one. And there's a lot of these tempera paint sticks on the market, but I really like the Kwik Stix brand. They're my favorite, and it's Kwik Stix. And then we're into paint markers. So here's one of those cheaper ones from Amazon. Let me shake it up. But it's got a very fine nib. And the Poscas come in the small nibs too. I just don't have any out right now. This one's working very well. See, this bright white shows up really well on this navy blue. Here's the chalk marker. And even though that's kind of a dark color, it still shows up on the dark background here. And here is the really thick Posca marker with the gray paint. Now I'm not sure this light orange will show up. And especially some of the neon colors, the fluorescent colors, do not show up on dark. Let's see. This one's, yeah, this is pretty pale. So I was mostly using this marker on the lighter pages. We'll see. It'll dry. It's kind of looking green because the orange is a little transparent and you're seeing the blue come through from behind. And then this is the fluorescent. I'll show you. You can see it, but it really is not its best on dark color. So here's the gray and just a different size nib. And this size nib is really, I think, the most versatile because you can just layer it to get chunkier shapes or just use the very tip to do very fine shapes. And here's the smaller nib in Posca in ivory. Yeah, ivory. And these, one coat. You don't have to keep going back over and over it. One coat. It's very opaque. This is a much darker blue, but that gives you a nice effect too if you're doing a color on top of a dark background. It's not as obvious, but it adds a lot of texture to the dark areas. And here's a larger orange. So any of these media work well. And let me show you on a different journal as well. So this is how I work in my Strata journals. I grab a bag, I throw a bunch of these dry media in here, and I take it with me with the journal. And so I can sit and work on it. The pages are already painted. I already have a background color, and I can just work on top of that with different patterning and layers. So here's the journal I made in the class. And I thought I'd show you because we do have pages with multiple values on it. You've got very light tones, medium, and dark on the same page. So I wanted to show you what you can do with that. Just doing the simple patterning. And so in my printables pack, I have some of these cards that have simple patterns on them for doing in your strata layers. So I thought I'd use some of these and we'd go through maybe this spread. And I've got a tin here of different media, Kwik Stix, some Stabilos, some of the cheap acrylic paint markers. I've also got a couple different pencils. These are Derwent Inktense pencils, which will activate with water, and some more drawing pencils. I also love the Caran Luminance pencils, and I got these in lighter colors to try to use on the darker background. And then here are the Caran Color II crayons, water soluble. So we'll use some of this, and I'll just pick a pattern. X's are honestly my favorite pattern. So let's just do some X's. And I'm just going to cover this page in X's, but when I get to a different tone of the background, I'm going to change the tone of the media I'm using so that it is able to be visible. So I'm starting up here on kind of a medium light color. So I'm going to start with a dark color. I've got sepia red in a Derwent drawing pencil. And let's see, I've also got Venetian red. So let's see, very similar, but I think it's fun to throw a couple different colors in here. And then we're getting really light here, so I can actually go lighter in my pencil and it will still show up. So this is an Inktense in Saddle Brown. Let's just see. Oh, it still shows up dark. It is not the color the end is painted, but it may get lighter if water is added. But I don't actually plan to add water to this journal too much. Sometimes I use my water brush and, you know, lightly add a little water to a few marks to soften them, but generally, once I paint the pages, I usually just work with dry media. So now we're getting into a darker color. So let's try these Luminance pencils. This is brown ochre 10%. That shows up really well on there. And this is Titan Buff. And this looks practically white to me, a little bit off. Some other things we have are the Stabilo Woody 3-in-1s in white, and I'm going to call this peach because I don't see a name on here for the color. And these will give you much thicker, chunkier marks, but they show up really well on dark colors. And then something else that will work are these Kwik Stix. This is one in kind of a lighter tanny peach color. And I've got a couple of these cheaper paint pens. Let's see if these are working. Oh, these are working nice. And these are great for doing very fine, detailed marks, because these are very tiny. All right, and so I would just keep filling things in the colors that are looking visible on the darker shades that are going on in this band, this strata. And you don't only have to use high contrast tones, right? So these show up very well because they're much lighter than the background color. But if you use something in kind of a middle tone, like this mustardy, what's it called? Raw sienna, it still shows up, it's still visible against this dark brown band, but not as obvious. So that helps give you a little depth. So some of your marks look like they're on the surface and some look like they're farther back because they're in a darker value. And then this zone here in between where the paint is transitioning from a lighter color to a darker color, it's not going to be as visible. So you can use either these dark ones from up here or the lighter ones from here. I think I'll just add those 4 though. And then down here, we're kind of transitioning out. The dark still is not showing up too well, so we'll do a little more of the lighter color. Okay, and now we're back down to mostly a medium light color with, here's one little island of dark. So while I've got all these light marking materials out, let's do that section and then we can work around it. So, and I like to think these because my inspiration was layers of earth and rock that is exposed when we cut into the earth, is to think about what would be found in these layers. Is it all one thing? Is this one giant layer of one type of earth or mineral? Or are there lots of things in here? Is it, you know, has it been disturbed over time? Are there layers of seashell? Are there layers of organic debris? Are there fossils in here? Are there giant stones? Are there teeny tiny little organisms? So when I'm just filling, it's basically abstract work, but that's the kind of things I'm thinking of when I'm filling in these areas of color. All right, so we filled in that chunk, and then I would just keep working here, but I would switch to kind of some of the darker media. So I've got some Kwik Stix in a dark color. And let's see, we've already done a lot of X's on here, so I think I'll switch to maybe doing, I think I'll do them vertical kind of bands. This brown color, not my favorite shade, but once it dries, I can paint over it or use other materials on top of it. So we'll come back to that when it dries in a minute. But I do like how thick these are, and so I can get a lot of color down quickly. Okay, and so what kind of things I like to go back on top of these tempera paint sticks with are colored pencils, and also the crayons, the water-soluble crayons, or they can just be wax crayons, but all the ones I have are both. So let's see. Going back over a dark color, you're going to want something a little lighter. And then the medium colors, I might want something dark. So let's use these. And it's already dry. It's literally been like a minute. So now I will take, let's see, you know what I might take too, is incorporate some of the lighter colors that we used up here. So I might just draw striping on these, and then that makes it a lighter color. I might add a different brown on top to kind of change the tone of the brown. This one's very similar. We'll see if this shows up at all. Oh yeah, shows up. So sometimes I like to do horizontal stripes across these. Let's try this darker pencil on these kind of orangish ones. So I just continue this way, and you know, I usually spend an hour or so on a page just playing around, filling in, adding patterning here and there. But I hope you enjoyed watching this video and maybe learned something or found some new art supplies that you like. I will try to put a link to all of these in the description. I shop at 2 art supply stores basically online, Blix and Jackson's. Blix is in the United States and Jackson's is in England. So I'll put links to their sites. You can usually find the supplies. Oh, Kwik Stix. I think the art supply store has it. If not, I'll send a link to Amazon for you guys. But these are all my favorite art supplies to use in the Strata journals when I'm working in them. And if you guys have any other supplies that you like to use in your journals, please share in the comments. We'd all love to learn about new favorite art supplies. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.